In the autumn of 1939, just days after Britain declared war on Germany, Barnes Wallis drove back to his drawing board at Vickers in Weybridge. He was driven by a singular thought. What could he do to shorten this conflict? He knew the existing 500-pound bombs were useless against the great ferro-concrete dams that powered the Ruhr. For months he calculated, filling notebooks with equations, until he conceived a 10-ton bomb that would penetrate deep and create an earthquake. Officials called his idea madness. Undeterred, Wallis built a model dam in a walled garden, 1/50th the size of the Moehne. With tiny gelignite charges, he proved a contact explosion underwater could smash concrete. From those test chips, he calculated that 6,000 pounds of the powerful explosive RDX dropped against the dam wall would open a breach. But he needed a way to place the bomb precisely. Watching his children skip marbles across a pond, he realized a spinning sphere could bounce over torpedo nets and sink against the dam. By the spring of 1943, after years of bureaucratic resistance, permission finally came to build the weapon. All that remained was to find men brave enough to deliver it. On March 21, 1943, Wing Commander Guy Gibson arrived at RAF Scampton to form a new squadron number 617. He handpicked the most experienced crews from across Bomber Command, including the low-flying specialist Mickey Martin and the young Australian Dave Shannon. They trained relentlessly over the lakes of England. When judging the height over water proved impossible, Farnborough engineers rigged 2 spotlights under the nose. When the 2 circles of light overlapped on the water, the aircraft was exactly at 60 feet. Meanwhile, at Reculver, Wallis watched prototype bombs crash and shatter until, on April 29th, a strengthened casing finally bounded in majestic flight across the waves. By mid-May, the squadron was ready. The Moehne and Eder lakes brimmed with spring meltwater. The moon would be full on the night of May 16th. The most radical weapon of the war was about to meet the men worthy of it. The moon was high and full as Guy Gibson led the first formation over the dark hills, cradling the Moehne Lake. Below lay the flat sheet of water, and across its neck the squat rampart of the dam, crowned by 2 towers. Then the dam came alive. Sharp flashes pricked along its length, and lines of angry red meteors streamed into the sky, the gunners hosing the darkness blindly. Gibson circled wide, keeping out of range, waiting for the others to form up. He called each aircraft. One by one they answered, but Astel was silent. He had been dead for an hour, cut down somewhere over the Dutch coast. Gibson turned wide over the eastern hills, the engineer sliding the throttles forward until the Lancaster roared, picking up speed, trembling as the nose came around. 3 miles ahead, the towers and the rampart stood against the moon. The spotlights flicked on beneath the fuselage, 2 pale yellow pools sliding over the water, closing and joining as the bomber dropped to exactly 60 feet. The flak gunners saw the lights. The streams of glowing shells swiveled and lowered, whipping toward them. Bomb aimer Spafford held the plywood sight to his eye, the towers closing in on the nails. "Bomb gone!" he screamed. Gibson hauled back on the wheel. The Lancaster rocketed over the dam between the towers. Wireless operator Hutchinson pulled the trigger, and a red very light soared into the night, curling against the moon, signaling a successful drop. The water between the towers rose and split, a huge white core erupting 1,000 feet toward the sky. Sheets of water spilled over the dam. Then the fury passed. The dam stood firm. Gibson called the next man. John Hopgood brought M for Mother down toward the lake. The spotlights merging, the run straight and level. The flak saw him, and the venomous fireflies darted at his aircraft. He plunged on. The gap was closing when the shells found him. A red glow blossomed around the inner port wing tank, and a long ribbon of flame trailed behind the bomber. The bomb aimer must have been hit because the weapon overshot the parapet completely, falling onto the powerhouse below. M for Mother was past the dam now, nose up, straining for height so the crew could bail out. Then the tanks blew up in an orange flare. A wing ripped away, and the bomber spun to the ground in burning, bouncing pieces. The bomb exploded near the powerhouse like a brilliant sun. It was all over in seconds. "Poor old Hoppy," a voice said over the radio. The remaining aircraft turned east toward the Eder. The valley was filling with fog, the ridges around 1,000 feet high. No place to dive a heavy bomber at night. Henry Maudsley tried first. He came slowly over the ridges, turned at the last moment, and forced the nose down into the gloom. The spotlights flicked on, closed quickly, and he was tracking for the dam. His red very light curled up as the bomb released, but something went wrong. The bomb hit the parapet at high speed and blew up on impact, a tremendous flash in the glare. The crew saw Z for zebra for a moment just above the explosion, then only blackness. Gibson called again and again. Maudsley never answered. Flight Commander Dave Shannon gave advice over the radio. Knight listened quietly, then dived a third time. He made a perfect run. The bomb skipping over the water in feathers of spray. Seconds later, the water erupted. Gibson slanted down to look and saw the wall of the Eder Dam burst open, the torrent crashing out. Over 200 million tons of water poured through the breach, foaming and tossing down the valley. The flood rolled at 30 feet a second, lengthening like a snake through the valley. Downstream, a car raced to get clear, its headlights like two frightened eyes spearing the dark. The foam crawled up on it. The headlights turned opalescent green as the water rolled over, and then they flicked out. Hutchinson tapped the code word dinghy in Morse. The Eder was destroyed. Gibson gave the order, "All aircraft, go home." The sound of their engines died over the hills as they flew west. 3 of their own were gone: Estelle, Hopgood, Maudsley. 56 men missing. The Moehne and the Eder were broken. 134 million tons of water from the Moehne and over 200 million from the Eder were tearing through the Ruhr valleys, sweeping away roads, bridges, factories, and railways. The heart of Germany's war industry had been struck on one moonlit night. The surviving Lancasters touched down at Scampton in the gray dawn, returning from the greatest precision raid the war had seen. The celebration was muted. Gibson wrote his 56 letters to the mothers by hand, one by one, before he was posted away from operations. The squadron settled into a quieter rhythm, training new crews, waiting for the next assignment. By early autumn, they were ready to prove the dam's raid was no fluke. The first attempt on the Dortmund-Ems Canal was abandoned when the weather mosquito reported fog over the target. As the Lancasters turned for home, David Maltby's aircraft encountered turbulence, its wing dipped, and the tip caught the water. The Lancaster cartwheeled in an instant, digging its nose into the sea and vanishing in a sheet of spray. Shannon circled the spot, but an air-sea rescue flying boat found only oil slicks. Maltby and his crew were gone. The following night, the squadron tried again. Les Knight, who had survived the Eder attack, was also lost. His aircraft struck trees near the canal, losing 2 port engines and damaging the tail. Knight ordered his crew to bail out and held the plane steady, but went down with it when he could not escape in time. The squadron had lost 5 of 8 aircraft that night, a cruel blow that left the survivors hollow-eyed and weary. Cochrane grounded the operation for a time, and the crews wondered if their special duties were over. Then, in November, a new commander arrived, Leonard Cheshire, a group captain at 25, who had asked to be dropped in rank to Wing Commander to take over the squadron. He was tall, dark, soft-spoken, with an introspective air that belied his record. 2 tours, a DSO and bar, a DFC. He would not let the squadron fade into obscurity. Cheshire began experimenting with a new approach to the problem that had plagued every precision raid: how to mark a pinpoint target clearly enough for bombers 5 miles above. The answer, he believed, was low-level marking, diving fast and close in a small aircraft to drop spot fires directly on the target. He convinced Cochrane to supply a Mosquito and later an American Mustang fighter, and began practicing the technique over English ranges. At the same time, Barnes Wallis was perfecting a new weapon, the Tall Boy, a 12,000-pound streamlined steel dart designed to penetrate deep into the earth and shake targets apart from below. The squadron was about to enter a new phase of the war. By April 1944, Leonard Cheshire had transformed 617 Squadron into a precision instrument. The new marking technique he pioneered in his Mosquito fighter was about to face its sternest test yet. Munich, defended by 400 flak guns and 100 searchlights, had never been accurately bombed. Harris wanted it marked on the deck. Cheshire believed he could do it. The 4 Mosquitoes flew first to Manston, refueled to the brim, and set course across the North Sea. Over Munich, the flares bloomed in the darkness and the guns opened up. Cheshire peeled off from 10,000 feet and held the nose straight down, the airspeed screaming past limits. He jabbed the bomb button at 500 feet, and the markers fell dead into the rail yards. Shannon and Kearns followed their spot fires, landing within 100 yards of Cheshire's. The Lancasters swung in from 10,000 feet, bombing the markers with methodical precision. For the first time, a major German city was struck with surgical accuracy by a small force. Recce photographs the next morning showed the yards cratered and useless. Cheshire had proven his point. Low-level marking worked, even over the heaviest defenses. On June 8th, the squadron was ordered to block the Salmer Tunnel, the only rail link through which a panzer division could rush from Bordeaux to the Normandy beachhead. A few hundred yards of earth and stone were all that stood between the division and the front. Cheshire took off in his Mosquito at dusk, carrying smoke markers instead of spot fires. The Tallboy bombs, the second generation of Wallis's earthquake weapons, were already winched into the Lancasters. They had never been used in combat before. Flares lit the bend of the Loire River, and Cheshire picked out the dark mouth of the tunnel piercing the hill. He dive-bombed from 3,000 feet, aimed his red spots point blank, and pulled up at 100 feet. The markers lay beautifully in the tunnel entrance. The Lancasters steadied on their bombing runs, and 90 seconds later the first Tallboys were streaking down through the night air. The bombs struck the earth without a brilliant flash, only momentary red pinpricks as they speared in and detonated nearly 100 feet deep. One Tallboy, dropped by an unknown bomb aimer, plunged through 70 feet of solid earth and chalk into the tunnel roof and exploded inside. Thousands of tons of earth and rock caved in, blocking the tunnel completely. The Panzer Division never reached the front. By July 1944, the V-weapon sites in the Pas-de-Calais were nearing completion. Hitler's secret weapons were already falling on London, and intelligence warned that the massive concrete blockhouses could launch rockets at a rate of thousands a week. Churchill ordered their destruction without fail. Only one weapon could touch them, the Tallboy. Only one squadron could place it with the required accuracy, 617. Cheshire took off in his Mustang and found the Watton blockhouse under haze. He dived through 70 flak guns to lay his smoke markers. The Lancasters followed at 18,000 feet, and the Tallboys struck home. At Wizernes, one bomb pierced the concrete dome. At Moehne, a Tallboy tore off a corner of the 20-foot roof and blocked the gun shafts. The underground chambers collapsed, burying 300 workers who had sheltered 500 feet down. Reconnaissance photographs showed the sites wrecked beyond repair. The concrete fortresses that the taut organization had promised Hitler were impregnable were now rubble. The rocket threat to London was ended. A single squadron, armed with a bomb that shook the earth, had destroyed what armies could not touch. The autumn of 1944 found 617 Squadron at a bleak Scottish airfield near Lossiemouth. Twice before they had tried to sink the Tirpitz, and twice the cloud had saved her. On November 12th, the weather finally held. 28 Lancasters lifted off heavily and turned north. They flew low over the gray North Sea to slip past the German radar. Over Tromsø Fjord, the smoke pots sat ready along the shoreline. The Germans had not primed them, and the battleship lay naked in the morning light. At 14,000 feet, the bomb aimers found their mark, and 3 Tallboys struck in rapid succession. Within minutes, the Tirpitz capsized, her bottom rising above the water like a stranded whale. Hundreds of sailors died in the freezing fjord. That winter, Wallis watched the first Grand Slam bombs being loaded into specially modified Lancasters. Each weapon weighed 22,000 pounds and measured 25 feet in length. The bomb doors could not close around its girth, so the ground crews simply removed them. On March 14th, the squadron took off for the Bielefeld Viaduct in northwestern Germany. 3,000 tons of conventional bombs had already failed to break it. One Lancaster carried the first Grand Slam into combat. The pilot released it from 18,000 feet, and the bomb tumbled downward, spinning faster as it fell. It struck the marsh 30 yards from the viaduct and bored 100 feet into the earth. When the explosion cleared, 7 arches had collapsed into a vast subterranean cavity. Wallis's theory of the earthquake bomb was proven at last. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. Before the squadron could disband, it was immediately detailed for Tiger Force, the long-range strategic bombing campaign against Japan. The men were retrained for the Pacific Theater. Only the atomic bombs falling on Hiroshima and Nagasaki canceled the deployment and finally scattered the men to peacetime lives. Wallis received £10,000 from the Royal Commission on Awards to Inventors. He never touched a penny of it. Every shilling went into a fund to educate the children of the airmen who had died. Guy Gibson had been killed in action over the Netherlands the previous September. Mickey Martin, the Australian who had flown with Gibson on the Dams raid, returned to Australia and survived the war. Leonard Cheshire, who had taken 617 to new heights of precision, was awarded the Victoria Cross. He later founded homes for the disabled. John Hopgood and Henry Maudsley were among the 56 men missing from the Dams raid. David Maltby had survived that night but was killed months later during the attack on the Dortmund-Ems Canal. Les Knight, who had broken the Eder with the final bomb, was also lost in that same operation. The squadron's other men scattered without fanfare. They had done what was asked of them and then returned to ordinary life. What remains is not the concrete or the steel. It is the memory of a few young men flying low over black water on a moonlit night. They carried a weapon that most experts said would never work. They proved that courage wedded to genius could move mountains and empty lakes. That is the story of 617 Squadron. If you have family stories from this era, stories of fathers or uncles who served in Bomber Command, we would be honored to read them in the comments below. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support allows us to continue bringing these stories to light. We read every comment and treasure each one. Thank you for listening.